Morning at 6:43, we're taking a closer look at the opioid epidemic, the deadliest drug crisis in American history, and something that touches more people here in Oklahoma than you might really realize. Oklahoma State University, in fact, reports Oklahoma is first in the nation for non-medical use of prescription drugs. And in the last 15 years, drug overdose deaths in Oklahoma are up 91%. Our guest this morning is a world-renowned journalist and the author of American Overdose, The Opioid Tragedy in 3 Acts. And he'll be speaking at a public event tonight in Tulsa that you'll want to make sure you try to get to. Chris McGreal, senior writer at The Guardian, formerly with the BBC. Thanks for coming in and joining us this morning. You've taken a comprehensive look at this across the nation. What surprises you the most about what you found?
I think that a couple of things, one of which was just how long this has gone on. It's been running for 2 decades, and it's only now really that we are sitting here talking about this in this way. It's grabbed the national attention. And the biggest, greatest drug epidemic in American history was two decades in the making. And the other thing is that this is largely an American epidemic. You don't see it in other countries. It's pretty much a uniquely American phenomenon.
That really surprised me. Your press material says it is a uniquely American tragedy. You don't see it around the world.
No, and I think that's partly because the prescribing rates in the United States are so high compared to other countries, and that in large part has been driven by industry in the United States, the medical industry, big pharma, which has much more influence over medical policy in this country than in other developed countries. You
write that this is really a 3-legged stool of a tragedy: congressional neglect, corporate greed, and illegal drug cartels. How do they all work together to create this?
Well, I think, like most things, it began with a good intent, which was to try and treat people who had chronic pain with the best medicines available. But it turned into a huge marketing exercise for the drug companies. And essentially, they took over medical policy. And even early on, when it became quite apparent that there was an epidemic in the making, and people inside the medical profession started to ring the alarm bells, then what you see is the drug companies realizing that they're perhaps not going to be able to sell as many prescription opioids as they want. They essentially change the conversation, and they get Congress on board, and for that matter, the country's regulators, like the Food and Drug Administration, to turn this into essentially a battle between mass prescribing and the availability of drugs. And then once finally, about 7 or 8 years ago, when it becomes apparent that the prescribing needs to be controlled and drugs start to become more difficult to obtain, then you see the cartels move in with heroin, a cheaper option to prescription pills.
Does it begin innocently with just a prescription for a toothache or back pain? Is that how most people end up getting hooked? Or are these now spread, you get one in a family and then everybody passes it out to friends and neighbors? How does it all begin for an average American?
In lots of different ways. The CDC says that you can become hooked on as little as 5 days worth of opioid prescriptions. So some people who were prescribed them for medical conditions do indeed become rapidly hooked. But because of the very, very high prescribing levels, that people were sent home with so many pills. At one point, there was one prescription written for every adult in this country. So the sheer availability of the drugs meant that they were indeed passed out at home, or they were left sitting in the medicine cabinet. Other people in the family start to use them, they experiment with them. Word spread that actually these drugs were very powerful, and some people just started using them for recreational use. I think one of the things that was really striking to me was in parts of the country that have been worst hit, like West Virginia, Eastern Kentucky, is how angry people there are that nobody warned them about just how powerful these drugs and how dangerous these drugs were. And lots of people there feel they just fell into it accidentally.
Oklahoma, as we've been saying, is especially hard hit as well. You've got an event tonight in Tulsa, just down the street here, 29th and Peoria at All Souls. What are you going to be talking about tonight?
Principally why this is an American epidemic and how it came about. Where were the institutions that were supposed to protect Americans over the past 20 years? This isn't just an epidemic created by the drug companies, although they obviously play an important role in this. Where was the medical profession? Where was the Food and Drug Administration, which is supposed to regulate these drugs? How was this allowed to run on for 20 years?
And hopefully what can be done to stop it, as you have also looked at that as well in your research and you'll be discussing that tonight. It's a widespread problem, and it only continues to grow worse. Chris McGreal, thanks so much for joining us. And you can find out more about Chris and his book. He's going to be speaking tonight, All Souls Unitarian Church. It's at 7 o'clock till 8:30, and it's at 2924 South Peoria. There's the information. And it is free. So you'll especially want to get down there if you can at 7 o'clock tonight, All Souls Unitarian Church, and hear what Chris has to say about this very American tragedy that's playing out every day in our country.